Test, test, test. I think that's on.
During the beginning part of the 20th century, well into sort of, I'd say the 1950s and 1960s, the resident musical director for New York City's Central Synagogue was a gentleman by the name of Lazar Weiner, who is a prolific composer of fantastic music that I would almost guarantee that many of you have heard before. Lazar Weiner, like so many of the people from our tradition, was born in Ukraine. And we will be doing a couple of pieces tonight that will be, and I'll explain a little bit later more, because I want to get to the singing part, but I just want everybody to understand that we'll be doing some music that we would do probably regularly, but the origins of this music is deeply embedded within us, whether we have taken a moment to realize it or not. So the beginning nigun is going to be something we will revisit for Mi Chamocha. And you can hear the dance like. Yai dai dai yada dai 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 yada dai 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 yada dai 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 yada da dai da 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 dai 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 da dai dai da dai dai da da dai die 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 da 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 die. We can do that again. Yai die die yada die, yai die 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 yada die, yai die die yada die, die 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 die, yada da die yada da die, yai die die da die, yada die die da da die, die 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 die. We're gonna do it again. Yai die die yada die, yai die 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 yada die, yai die die yada die, die 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 die, yada die yada da die, die die yada die, yada die yai die da die, die 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 die.
Present with Cantor Hyman and Rabbi Friedman and our president, Hank Bernstein, it is a joy to welcome congregants and friends and guests as we join together for Shabbat here in the sanctuary and in the sanctuary on the live stream. Shabbat Shalom. Let's be sure to be among community. Please take this moment to introduce yourself in the comments or find someone new here to greet. This Shabbat, our congregation celebrates the bar mitzvah of Aaron Cohen, who has been in this sanctuary his whole life. It is a joy, Aaron, to celebrate with you, your parents, Sarah and Alex, and your brother, Charlie, as we turn to page 2 and kindle our Shabbat lights.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat.
Our Shabbat Kiddush is on page 5.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu v'shabbat kodsho be'ahava u'v'ratzon hinchilanu zikaron למעשה וראשית, כי הוא יום תחילה למקראי קודש, זכר ליציאת מצרים. כי בנו בחרת ואותנו קידשת מכל העמים, ושבת קודשך באהבה וברצון הנחלתנו. Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh hashabbat l'chaim.
Mazel tov. In the Jewish community, we are not strangers to unsettling times throughout our history. Jewish wisdom guides us to make space for joy and for peace with Shabbat and with Purim, which is around the corner. And on Purim, you can bring each other joy with the tradition of giving each other mishloach manot, treats, which you can order if you look in your email, if you're a member of the congregation. And here today on Shabbat, we create that space first and foremost with song. And so, with the songs of Kabbalat Shabbat, we sing in Shabbat, beginning on page 10, and to bring our energy into our singing, we invite you to rise, body or spirit.
החמה מראש האילנות נסתלקה, בואו ונצא לקראת שבת המלכה, הנה היא יורדת הקדושה ברוחה, ועמה מלאכים צבא שלום מנוחה. בואי בואי המלכה, בואי בואי הכלה, שלום עליכם מלאכי השלום. The sun on the treetops no longer is seen. Come gather to welcome the Sabbath, our Queen. Behold her descending, the holy, the blessed, and with her the angels of peace and of rest. Draw near, and here abide. Draw near, a Sabbath bride. Peace also to you, you angels of peace.
Page 11, third song down.
Ki yishmer Shabbat, yishmereni. Ki yishmer Shabbat, yishmereni. Oti leomead beino veini. Oti leomead beino veini. Ki yishmer Shabbat, yishmereni. Ki yishmer Shabbat, yishmereni. Oti leomead beino veini. Oti leomead beino veini.
We have made space for the Shabbat bride. We turn to pages 20 and 21 for Lecha Dodi.
Lecha Dodi לקראת כלה בני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה בני שבת נקבלה. שמור וזכור בדיבור אחד ישמיענו אל המיוחד. אדוני אחד ושמו אחד לשם ותפארת ולתחילה. לך דודי לקראת כלה בני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה בני שבת נקבלה. לקראת שבת לכו ונלכה כי הם עיקר הברכה. מראש מקדם נסוכה סוף מעשה במחשבה תחילה. לך דודי לקראת כלה בני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה בני שבת נקבלה. התעוררי התעוררי כי באורך קומי אורי. אורי אורי שיר דברי כבוד אדוני עלייך נגלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה בני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה בני שבת נקבלה. בואי בשלום עצרת בעלה גם בשמחה ובצולה. תוך אמוני עם סגולה. בואי חלה בואי חלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה בני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה בנשבת נקבלה לך דודי לקראת כלה בנשבת נקבלה לך דודי לקראת כלה בנשבת נקבלה.
On page 28, we continue with our call to worship.
Lai 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 la lai lai la lai 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 la lai lai la lai 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 Barechu et Adonai HaMevorach Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Leolam vaed Lai 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 lai
On the middle of page 31, I'll let you in. When I regularly study and consider the words of prayer I might select from our Siddur or the words of poetry I might bring to you from my shelf, for it seems 2 years have been drawn to the middle of page 31. And that first line, "This is an hour of change," has felt relevant every day for so long. We join together in words of prayer. This is an hour of change. Within it, we stand uncertain on the border of light. Shall we draw back or cross over? Where shall our hearts turn? Shall we draw back, my brother, my sister, or cross over? This is the hour of change, and within it we stand quietly on the border of light. What lies before us? Shall we draw back, my brother, my sister, or cross over?
Baruch atah Adonai Hama'ariv Aravim.
On the top of page 33, together. As you taught Torah to those whose names I bear, teach me Torah too. Its mystery beckons, yet I struggle with its truth. You meant Torah for me. Did you mean the struggle for me too? Don't let me struggle alone. Help me to understand, to be wise, to listen, to know. Lead me into the mystery.
Baruch atah Adonai Ohev Amo Yisrael. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad Baruch Shem Kevon Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed.
Please be seated. Page 36. At the middle of the page, together. You shall love Adonai your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. Take to heart these instructions with which I charge you this day. Impress them upon your children. Recite them when you stay at home and when you are away, when you lie down and when you get up. Bind them as a sign on your hand, and let them serve as a symbol on your forehead. Inscribe them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Thus you shall remember to observe all my commandments and to be holy to your God. I am Adonai, your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. I am Adonai, your God. Page 39 at the top of the page. Together. Standing on the parted shores of history, we still believe what we were taught before ever we stood at Sinai's foot, that wherever we go, it is eternally Egypt, that there is a better place, a promised land, that the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness, that there is no way to get from here to there except by joining hands, marching together. Page 40.
Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh nora tehilot, osefele nora tehilot, osefele. Malechotecha ra'u vanecha bokei hayam lifnei Moshe uMiriam zeili zeili anu ve'ameru Adonai imloch leolam vaed. Adonai imloch leolam vaed. Adonai imloch leolam vaed. Leolam, leolam, leolam vaed.
More than the Jewish people has kept Shabbat, Shabbat has kept the Jewish people. Page 44.
V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et HaShabbat. לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם ביני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ וביום השביעי שבת ויהי נפש ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת.
Prayer invites God's presence to suffuse our spirits. God's will to prevail in our lives. Prayer may not bring water to parched fields, nor mend a broken bridge, nor rebuild a ruined city. But prayer can water an arid soul, mend a broken heart, rebuild a weakened will. Page 46 and following, please rise.
Adonai, sefatai tiftach, ufi yagid tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu ve'Elohei avoteinu ve'imoteinu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, ve'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, ve'Elohei Leah, Ha'el, Hagadol, Hagibor, v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, Vekonei Hakol, Vezocher Chaste Avot Ve'imahot, Umevi Geula Livnei V'neihem, Lema'an Shemo Be'ahava, Melech Ozer U'Moshiach Umagen, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham ve'ezrat Sarah. Atah gibor le'olam Adonai, Mechaye hakol, Atah Rav lehoshia, Mashiv haruach umorin hagashem, Mechalkel chayim bechesed, Mechaye hakol berachamim rabim, Somech noflim verofeh cholim, Umatir asurim, Umekayem emunato, Lishenei afar, Michamocha ba'al gevurot, Umido melach, Melech memit umechaye umatzmiach Yeshua v'ne'eman ata lehachayot hakol Baruch atah Adonai mechaye hakol Atah kadosh v'shimcha kadosh u'kadoshim b'chol yom yahalelucha selah Baruch atah Adonai ha'el hakadosh.
Please be seated. Turning to the top of page 61, we join together in our blessing for peace. Grant us peace, your most precious gift, O eternal source of peace, and to give us the will to proclaim its message to all the peoples of the earth. Bless our country as a safeguard of peace, its advocate among the nations. May contentment reign within our borders, health and happiness within our homes. Strengthen the bonds of friendship and fellowship among all the inhabitants of every land. Plant virtue in every soul, and may the love of your name hallow every home and every heart. Praised are you, Eternal One, who blesses our people with peace. Baruch atah Adonai, hamvarech et amo Yisrael b'shalom. Page 60.
Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. מלך אדון לכל השלום כי אתה מלך אדון לכל השלום שלום רב על ישראל עמך תשים לעולם שלום רב על ישראל עמך תשים לעולם וטוב בעיניך לברך את עמך ישראל בכל עת ובכל שעה בשלומך שלום רב על ישראל עמך תשים לעולם שלום רב על ישראל עמך תשים לעולם תשים לעולם תשים לעולם.
May the words of Isaiah, nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore, become true in our own day. We take these moments for silent prayer.
לרצות אמרי פי והגיון ליבי לפניך אדוני צורי וגואלי May the visions of my dreams and the wishes of my heart be acceptable unto you, Adonai, my God and my Redeemer.
In a moment, we will be on page 253 at the middle of the page for a blessing for healing. Earlier today, I watched a bit of the Shabbat evening service at a Reform congregation in Kyiv and listened to Rabbi Julia Gries lead a line from a traditional prayer, Ahavat Olam, saying the words about Torah day and night we will reflect on them, for they are our life, and doing them lengthens our days. We pray for all facing the bloodshed and fear in Ukraine, for the lengthening of their days in number and in purpose. And we pray for our own healing, for the lengthening of our own days in number and in purpose. If you have a loved one touched by serious illness or brokenness, mind, body, or spirit, please add that name to the comments or speak that name aloud now.
Mi shebeirach avoteinu mikor habracha leimoteinu. May the source of strength, who blessed the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Mi shebeirach imoteinu mikor habracha lavoteinu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
Our thoughts now move from thoughts of brokenness and healing to thoughts of joy and celebration and gratitude as we prepare to sing Shehechianu on page 344. But first, we take moments to recognize all of those wonderful things in our lives. The Hebrew word for gratitude, hakarat hatov, literally means to notice the good. And we know it is so important to take time to notice that good. And so for any of you on the live stream, we hope that you'll type into the chat some of those wonderful things that are going on in your lives, birthdays or anniversaries or other wonderful new jobs, new schools, whatever it is. We also want to offer a big mazel tov to our own past president, Fred Strober, who is being named the 2022 AJC American Jewish Committee's Judge Learned Hand Award. And we're so excited to celebrate with Fred, truly deserved for his service to the Jewish community. Anyone here in the sanctuary got anything, something really good for us? We always need good news. Feel free to shout it out and tell us what's going on. Leanne. Happy Social Worker Month and International Women's Month. This is your month, Leanne. And quite a few women and social workers among us. That's a wonderful reason to recognize the good, the social workers and the women among us who are doing such good work. Anyone else? I know I'm thrilled to have my family here as always. They bring me so much joy. Anyone else? Something wonderful?
Anything happening tomorrow?
Oh, well, that's a pretty good one. Sarah? Today is Aaron's actual birthday. Like, this is the real deal bar mitzvah. Like, actually, you are bar mitzvah today. You are becoming a bar mitzvah. Wow. Margie? It pales in comparison. I imagine it's wonderful. It's not a competition. We need as many good things as we can
all
get.
The joy.
That's a very big deal. Congratulations, Mazel Tov, Marty, that senior vice president of your company. We know you've worked so hard for this, and you deserve this. So, so wonderful. John? Oh, Ella turns 2. I have to tell you, that was one of my favorite. Normally, when I name babies, they're very little when we welcome them into the covenant, when we have a simchat bat, because they're still babies. But because of the pandemic, she was almost 2, and she was running around, and it was the most fun simchat bat naming of a daughter, welcoming her into the covenant, one of the most fun I've ever done. So happy birthday to Ella, and mazel tov to your family. Oh, so many wonderful reasons. Well, for all of these and so many more, let's join together in our blessing of gratitude.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Shehecheyanu v'kiyimanu v'higi'anu lazman hazeh Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Shehecheyanu v'kiyimanu v'higi'anu lazman hazeh.
Just over 150 years ago, this very week, Solomon Naumovich Rabinovich was born on the outskirts of Kiev. That name maybe doesn't ring a bell. Maybe you know him by his pen name, Shalom Aleichem. Sometimes referred to as the Jewish Mark Twain, Shalom Aleichem is most famous for his story Tevye the Dairyman, later adapted to become, of course, Fiddler on the Roof, which offered so many a glimpse into the Jewish life of the shtetls of Eastern Europe. For those of us from Ashkenazi Jewish backgrounds, Kiev, Lvov, Odessa were some of the cities that our great-grandparents emigrated from to find a better life in America. When we hear the Yiddish folk tales like those of Shalom Aleichem, we imagine our own ancestors in those very towns and cities. The horrifying war that has devastated Ukraine over this past week is personal to so many of us. It has struck a chord in our American consciousness that has overshadowed concerns of inflation, COVID, or other day-to-day worries. For so many Americans that grew up during the Cold War, the threat of Russian nuclear aggression is real and scary. And for a younger generation, many are experiencing this kind of existential dread for the first time. And this war has touched our Jewish community in particular. At a time when anti-Semitism is on the rise across the world, where Holocaust denial is still rampant, where those in power abuse the memory of the Holocaust for their own political agendas, Vladimir Putin and his administration has both metaphorically and physically trampled on the memory of the Holocaust. It began with Putin's false claim that this invasion was to protect Russian speakers in Ukraine from what he termed, quote, a genocide from the regime in Kyiv, or as he has also said, quote, the denazification of Ukraine. These statements are not only blatantly false, but any time we make false equivalents to the Holocaust, we do a disservice to the memory of those victims. And to add to this, during the indiscriminate bombing of Kyiv, Russian forces desecrated the Babin Yar Memorial Site, a memorial to over 30,000 Jews shot in cold blood there during the Shoah. Our Jewish connection to Ukraine, however, cannot only be defined by tragedy that befell our people in those lands. Growing up in Boston in the late 80s and 90s, as the Soviet Union was collapsing, I remember our synagogue welcoming thousands of Soviet Jews, many from Ukraine, fleeing religious persecution. I remember befriending the children, helping furnish their apartments, and bringing them meals. And then, in 1994, the Boston Jewish community, of which I was a part, officially began a sister city relationship with Dnipropetrovsk, now simply called Dnipro, in eastern Ukraine. We helped raise money to build a synagogue, a Jewish day school, an orphanage, a community center, and so much more for the now free Ukrainian Jews of the city to celebrate their Jewish heritage for the first time in generations. I like to imagine that some of the money I raised for tzedakah as a teenager living in Boston made its way to help other Jewish teens find community in Dnipro. I even wonder if a young Volodymyr Zelensky, who grew up in the suburbs of Dnipro during the 80s and 90s, attended one of those very community centers we helped to establish. By now, we've all heard the inspirational quotes from the president of Ukraine, a Jew and the grandson of Holocaust survivors. Zelensky inspired the world when, in response to an offer from an airlift from the US, he said, "I need ammunition, not a ride." Some have compared Zelensky to the Maccabees, the Judean fighters of the Hanukkah story who defended the empire against enormous odds and rededicated the temple in the 2nd century BCE. Perhaps, though, as Purim is approaching, Zelensky's heroism might be better compared to Queen Esther. In our congregational email offering support and ways to donate, we quoted the words of the Jewish queen in the book of Esther, spoken of the Jewish queen in the book of Esther. "Perhaps you have attained power for just a time such as this, for this very purpose." Next week, the Shabbat before Purim is known as Shabbat Zachor, the Sabbath of remembering. During the morning Torah reading, we add a special reading to remember the attack of Amalek against the Israelites shortly after their exodus from Egypt. Amalek attacked a defenseless group of Israelite refugees, tired and worn from their harrowing escape. Amalek attacked from behind, going after the most vulnerable, the women, the children, the civilian non-combatants. In his book, Jewish Preaching in Times of War, 1800 to 2001, Rabbi Mark Saperstein examines sermons from all over the world that speak to moments such as this. One sermon from his book that especially spoke to me this week was from one of the great rabbis of the 19th century, David Einhorn, who served here in Philadelphia at Congregation Knesset Israel. Actually moved to Philadelphia from the South, only Baltimore, but that was the South back then, because of his abolitionist views. He was run out of town. In preaching against the Confederacy, Shabbat Zachor, March 19th, 1864, Einhorn's words feel so relevant today. His sermon, entitled "War with Amalek views Amalek as a metaphor for the most evil in society. Einhorn writes, "It is Amalek's seed. Wherever the evil and wicked rule, wherever, especially rude violence with cheaply bought courage, makes war upon defenseless innocence, and wherever a majority in the service of falsehood directs its blows with ruthless fist against the very face of a weak minority. And thus, even today, the war cry is heard, God's is the war with Amalek, from generation to generation." End quote. In every generation, an Amalek will arise. An Amalek who preys on the innocent and weak. An Amalek who uses falsehoods and misinformation. An Amalek with cheaply bought courage rooted in violence. And in every generation we pray, there is a Queen Esther. Brave souls who, despite risks to themselves and their own family, choose to stand up to tyranny and lies. Holy people in power for just a time such as this, for this very purpose. Volodymyr Zelensky is one of those, and thank God there are many more. Congregation Road of Shalom is proud to be a member of the World Union for Progressive Judaism, the international umbrella organization for all Reform and progressive congregations. Having studied at Leo Beck College in London, which trains many European rabbis, I am honored to count a number of those modern-day Queen Esthers as my friends and colleagues, including Kyiv-based Rabbi Alexander Duchovny, who is giving regular updates as we speak from a Soviet-era shelter, while at the same time coordinating supplies and assistance to his own progressive Jewish community and beyond. Last week, I shared updates from another friend and colleague, Rabbi Tanya Sachnovich, who over the course of 4 days, after being turned away from numerous border crossings, has finally managed to find safety, along with her son and family, in Moldova. The experience has given her a new appreciation for the kindness of strangers, as volunteers brought food and supplies to the 10 miles of cars lining up to get out of Ukraine. Speaking about the experience, Rabbi Sachnovich shared, quote, "Moments of such terror and aggression bring out the best and the worst in people. Seeing that actually goodness prevails gives me so much hope for humanity." I agree with Rabbi Sachnovich. I have faith in humanity. Tomorrow morning, Aaron will chant from the final portion of the book of Shemot, Exodus. As with most books of our Torah, the portion ends unfinished, leaving us in a place of uncertainty. The Mishkan, the tabernacle, has been completed, and the Israelites are about to set off again on their journey to the Promised Land. But we end the book of Shemot not knowing their future, not knowing where they will go or what will befall them. And so our tradition offers a ritual at this moment. When we finish a book of Torah, we say the words, Chazak, Chazak, V'nit Chazek. Be strong, and may we strengthen one another. In moments of uncertainty and fear, we turn to our community and we lift one another up. We look to the Queen Esthers, heroic figures called by God to serve our people in times of need. We call out and we condemn the Amaleks, authoritarian regimes that target the innocent and peddle in falsehoods. And we join with our global Jewish family to offer prayers of peace and hopes for a brighter tomorrow. Chazak, chazak, v'nit chazek. Be strong, and let us strengthen one another. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may this be God's will. Shabbat Shalom. I feel you, man. We continue in our service now on page 282, followed by 287 with Aleinu. Please rise.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצא בראשית, שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסד ארץ, ומושב יקרו בשמיים ממעל, ושכינת עוזו בגובהי מרומים, הוא אלוהינו אין עוד. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד.
Please be seated. Our thoughts now turn to those who have departed this earth, our own loved ones, those whom our friends and neighbors have lost, the martyrs of our people whose graves are unmarked, and those of every race and nation whose lives have been a blessing to humanity. As we remember them, we meditate on the meaning of love and loss, of life and death. This week, our congregation observes yahrzeit for Alfred A. Abrahams, Gertrude Aronson, Darla Ann Ashby, John Stephen Bank, Edith Barber, Hazel T. Barnett, Marvin Barnett, Bernard Berend, Sylvia Bergen, Bessie G. Blesnak, Regina Block, Stella Goodman Block, Diane Blumenthal, Terry Brandt, Regina Freudenreich Brenman, Molly Binsky, Harry Cohen, Bernard Cohn, Harry Crane, Morgan Donato, Annie Eason, Richard B. Eisenberg, Morton Edward Israel Ehrlichman, Ina Rose Feldman, Rose Rice Feldman, Robert L. Fine, Dorothy G. Finkel, Blanche Marks Foles, Stephen Frank, Herbert S. Frieder, Rose Furman, Samuel Milton Garfinkel, Hedwig Gertzley, Henry E. Gertzley, Lena Ginsberg, Abraham H. Gitlow, Jeanette Miriam Goldberg, Sadie Goldberg, Esther Goldman, Fred Gorenstein, Samuel P. Gross, Maxine Hess, Rita G. Hinlin, Sidney Golden Hofkin, Theodore Holland, Julie Jaycox, Thomas Jenkins, Lena Jonas, Cecilia Kahan, Adolph Klein, Emmanuel Cohn, Jacob Kossman, Sarah Maybaum Lamb, Sophie S. Lang, Benjamin Franklin Teller Langsdorf, Harold Lashner, Walter H. Laser, Eunice Lazen, Ruth Kellum Levin, Ray Summer Levy, Martin Lieberman, Robert Livingston, Etta O. Lockheim, Louis Samuel Megan, Jacob Mandel, Mel Mance, Eileen Melnick, Marvin Miller, Marjorie Meyerson, Dorothy Goldsmith Netter, Maurice Nisman, Nettie Bacharach Nussbaum, Claire Oppenheimer, Florence Perlman, Alexander Prager, Martin Padel, Jeanette M. Putzel, Diane Rappaport, Albert R. Rode, Raisa Robbins, Ruth Rosenberg, Joseph Walter Rosenbluth, Diane Rosenthal, Keith L. Sachs, Susanna Sandberg, Amelia Teller Schlesinger, Minnie Krieger Schloss, Justin M. Selig, Betty Seligson, Simone P. Schneider, Isidore Slee, Norman G. Sloan, Marshall Spector, Thomas Spector, Arlene Starkman, Herbert M. Stein, Lester G. Stepacker, Margaret F. Stern, Sidney S. Stern, Annie Strauss, Robert Thomas, Rebecca Tickton, Shirley Waxman, Frank Weiner, Sarah Winkelstein, Miriam Wolfe, Rabbi Louis Wolsey, Helen Mark Zander. And we add to those names those who've been taken from our midst, but not from our hearts, in these most recent days, for whom we are observing Shaloshim, the 30 days of mourning. Gail Malka Meister. If you are observing Yartzeit or Shaloshim for a loved one whose name was not mentioned, I invite you to write their names in the comments or to speak their names aloud at this time. Zichronam livracha, may their memories be a blessing. We turn to page 294 and rise for the mourner's Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei rabbah, bi'alma divrach irutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon uvyomechon, uv'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, b'agala v'zman kariv v'imru, amen. Yehei shemei rabbah mevarach le'alam olmei omaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, v'yithadar v'yithaleh v'yithalal, shemei dekudisha abrichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, damiran bi'alma v'yimru, amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'yimru, amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'yimru, amen. May the one who creates harmony on high bring peace to all of us, and let us say, Amen.
Ose shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imeru, amen. Ose shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imeru, amen.
We wish you a Shabbat Shalom. If this is your first time with us, we hope that you'll introduce yourself to the wonderful Ellen Poster, who is waving in the back, who would love to welcome you and help introduce you to the congregation. We will conclude in song tonight on page 321, the words of Adon Olam.
So as I mentioned earlier, many of the melodies tonight that were there were Ukrainian or of Ukrainian descent, from the opening niggin to the melody that was used almost 100 years ago by Minkowski, the Shabbat Hamalka. Da, 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 da. And we heard the Michamocha from Lazar Weiner. And when we, little beknownst to us, when we go Michalkel Chaim Bechesed, so that would be Max Wahlberg, who was also Ukrainian descent. And Eliezer Gorovich wrote the melody for Adon Olam that most of us are very familiar with. It's important that we revisit these melodies because they are as much a part of us as we are of them. It was 8 years ago on this very day that Russia annexed Crimea. And the world watched, not knowing exactly what was going to happen. Some people said that it was the will of the people that actually wanted it. But as we're finding out, it's not everything that we hear. And if we ignore our history, including our musical history, we are doomed to forget a great deal of who we are in the process. Adon olam asher malach b'terem kol yetzir nivra li'ed nasa b'chefzo kol azay melech shemo nikra v'acharei kichlot hakol levado yimloch nora ve'hu haya ve'hu hove ve'hu yeh betifara ve'hu echad ve'ein sheni להמשילו להכבירה ברי ראשית בלי תכלית ולא העוז והמשרה והוא אלי וחי גואלי בצור חבלי בצרה והוא ניסי ומנוס לי מנת כוסי ביום אקרא בידו הפקיד רוחי בעת אישן והעירה ועם רוחי גביעתי אדוני לי ולא יירא.
Adonai li velo ira. Adonai is with me, and I shall not fear.
יברכך אדוני וישמרך יאר אדוני פניו אליך ויחונך יישא אדוני פניו אליך וישם לך שלום. יברכך אדוני וישמרך יאר אדוני פניו אליך ויחונך יישא אדוני פניו אליך וישם לך שלום. יברכך Adonai v'yishmerecha.
May God bless us and keep us.
Ya'er Adonai panav eilecha v'chuneka.
May God's light shine upon us, and may God be gracious unto us.
Yisa Adonai panav eilecha v'yasem lecha shalom.
May we feel God's presence within us always, and may we all be granted God's most precious gift, the gift of peace. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may this be God's will. Shabbat Shalom.